Hello and welcome. Today we'll be talking about the Kaldivites, a former people who were transformed into monsters. This story is a bit dark and has some very sensitive content to it. So, if you don't like that, please click away. With that said, let's begin. The Kaldivites were once a people who lived at around 30,000 of the First Era. They were usually tall and bulky, with fur that was like a bear's fur. They had jagged teeth, no snout, and they were usually colored a dark brown. The Kaldivites were known for their lack of aging and for their immortality. This means that all Kaldivite aging had to be done with magic. Otherwise, they could literally be babies for thousands of years, theoretically. The Kaldivites likely lived among numerous different tribes or in loosely organized kingdoms. We do not know their political system since their language is largely untranslatable, and there was a stunning lack of evidence of conflict between Kaldivite tribes. The only source of bodies of the Kaldivites is under later periods, where they were enslaved or nearly wiped out, much later on. Thus, because of this, many in-universe scholars believe that the Kaldivites were actually largely peaceful, but we do not know what actually happened. For all we know, their bodies could have just been resurrected, as the Kaldivites would become infamous for necromancy, but we'll talk about that later on. Nonetheless, they still made several achievements for their time. First of all, they are one of the earliest people that we know of that existed without a doubt on Neuron. Secondly, they had one of the first written, not one of, the first written language in existence on Neuron. Unfortunately, as of now, their language is largely untranslatable, which is kind of an excuse on my part. And most importantly, the Kaldivites were very advanced for their time. They were responsible for the first cities on Neuron. Despite all of this, though, not much is known about this period of time, due to the fact that this was literally occurring in 30,000 of the First Era, and in this period of time, not a lot was written. But there is still an event which is universal and which most definitely affected the Kaldivites very severely, and that is Sayathar's rebellion, which occurred in 28,000 of the First Era. I have a video on deities, including Sayathar. If you want to see that, the link will be in the description. Sayathar's rebellion was gigantic. It spread across the continent of Neuron. I won't get into it here. However, one major effect that it had on the Kaldivites is that it caused them to begin to fight against each other. The fighting was so savage that almost 140 million people out of 160 million people died. Now, to be fair, there were likely millions of other ancient peoples who fought and died as well. But these figures still show that the Kaldivites were most certainly devastated. It was after this point in which we begin to see the decline of the Kaldivites. However, the decline itself really depends on which region we're talking about. Each region and area has their own decline of the Kaldivites' story. We'll talk about a few of them here. The first story is a very dark story. It comes from the land of Marthier, located in the northwest of the continent of Ahri. If you do not like sensitive content, you can skip this by clicking the timestamp on the screen. Now, at around 28,000 to 26,000 of the First Era, the Kaldivites in Marthier were invaded by the Nethse or Nethse, one or the other. The Nethse are really just a race that I haven't developed yet. They're pretty obscure as of now. However, what is known is that the Nethse would conquer much of Marthier, and they would enslave the Kaldivites. Here, The Kaldivites suffered under brutal oppression with horrific stories of starvation, torture, and even a shockingly high amount of Kaldivites being raped. In fact, the Nithsay were infamous for their horrific treatment, and it was often so bad that the Kaldivites died en masse because of the horrendous things that they did. This included the mass amounts of times... Wait, no. This horrific treatment would only be tolerated for so long, so at around 27,500 to 25,000 of the First Era, the Kaldivites revolted. They completely destroyed the Nithsay, and those who were lived would be bound to the Kaldivites by soul magic and necromancy. The Kaldivites would raise many of these people back from the dead just to make them immortal so that they can control them and enslave them, basically. So, basically, for all of those Nithsays who did horrific things, instead of, killing them, they used soul magic, brought them back to life, and then they would enslave them for all eternity. Now, this actually goes to show just how powerful these Kaldivites are. In fact, soul magic is very difficult for people to actually use. But let's move on. That'll be a topic for another video. Eventually, the Kaldivites came into contact with the Wolfa people, who initially tried to be friendly when they migrated into Marthier. However, the Kaldivites feared that they would be enslaved once again, and they decided to attack the Wolfa villages. They slaughtered these populations, causing the Wolfa to respond. The Wolfas were much more powerful than the Kaldivites, perhaps due to much more heavy divine intervention, but this period of time is kinda unknown since the Kaldivites didn't write that much during this period of time. What is known, however, is that the Kaldivites were they were driven underground, where they would remain trapped forever afterwards. Fortunately, not all places would suffer such a horrific treatment. However, there are also lots of cases where we just don't know what happened. On the continent of Duneland/Duneland, for example, the Kaldivite story is much more mysterious, if you can even call it a story. In fact, in eastern Duneland, they just vanished. No major wars, no enslavement, no nothing. They just vanished. There are many theories which I won't get into, but I could, give them in a comment if you wish. But I'd rather not talk about them. But ultimately, no one really knows what happened to them. They just kind of vanished. Now, I'm not going to really get into each disappearance story. I might talk about more of them. There are some that are actually quite interesting and well documented about how the Kaldivites fell. And there's actually some places where the Kaldivites were able to live above ground far afterwards. However, by the most part, by the 22,000s of the First Era, they were mostly gone or underground, with a few exceptions. So, I'm going to ask myself a question here, for some reason. Now, how are the Kaldivites viewed in the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th eras? Well, simple. They're seen as monsters that live underground that use dark magic. In fact, the Kaldivites are very attuned with dark magic, to such a point that some have even mastered it. This involves things such as necromancy, blood magic, but also communicating and dealing with Shevku. Deities video to know what they are? They communicate with these Shevku in return for power, but they don't actually worship them, instead just using them as vessels to gain power in return for certain deeds. The Kaldivites are largely frowned upon, and they are regularly attacked, They are regularly attacked by the outside world, and they're often portrayed in various mythologies as terrible creatures. To be fair, though, the Kaldivites also do similar things to some people on the outside world, mostly to serve their Shevku in return for power. With that being said, though, I'm going to end the video here. ear. Thank you all for watching this short video. If you like the content, do all the subscribing and yeah, you know. But most importantly, make sure to comment. On a genuine side, I really appreciate any comment that I can get. If you have some time as well, you can join my Discord too. We do some things on there occasionally, and I do like to make some Discord specific announcements. That's it though. Have a good day or night, and I'll see you all another time.